Good morning, everybody. We have a great show coming your way today on GoJo and Golic. Here's what you have to look forward to. Christian Gonzalez, the PATS second-year cornerback, going to join the program. Plus, NBA beef. Love a little beef in the Twitter streets. We will talk about that. Plus, very demure. GoJo, very mindful. Senior, very considerate. NFL, very cutesy. We'll get into it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. We got a great show for everybody. As always, download, subscribe, rate, and review the thing. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Fun one coming up today. As Jesse mentioned, Christian Gonzalez is going to stop by. Was my pick last year for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Was on that track very much before an injury that robbed him of the rest of his rookie season. So excited to see what it's going to look like in the sophomore campaign and what it's been like in Pat's camp. I mean, he plays on the side of the ball, Dad, that just lost Matthew Judon to the Atlanta Falcons in a very public beef between the two sides. So I'd imagine there were some days in the defensive meeting room that were a little bit zesty during the course of this.
Well, I mean, they're a team that's led by their defense. The offense has struggled, and that can wear on you. Certainly had those couple of those years in Philly where the team was led by the defense, and or you were kind of trying to get the offense to come along for the ride, and it can get dicey if it gets away from you. That's where leadership really kind of comes into play.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's a moment, I'm sure, for everyone in camp, and listen, as an offensive player, where if you're getting over on the other side a bunch, it's great because you feel good, and then at some point you realize, hey, we're going to need that side of the ball to help us win games too. So if we're kicking their ass every day, it might not be the best thing in the world. So we could certainly get into plenty about the new era Patriots with Christian Gonzalez coming up in the second hour. We also have our Big 12, Big 4 questions looking ahead to the college football season as Week 0 gets going this weekend, especially after some comments from Mike Gundy, who is adjusting very well to the new world of college athletics. But Dad, speaking of leadership, there is no other place we can start today other than with what we got out of Miami yesterday. Tua Tagovailoa went on with our friends over at the Dan Le Batard Show and apparently had some feelings that he wanted to get off his chest. Now, Tua Tagovailoa comes into the league as a player fresh off a catastrophic injury to end his career at Alabama. He still winds up being a top round pick by a Miami Dolphins team, at that point led by Brian Flores, who is tasked with pulling this team out of the tank for Tua-sized ditch in Miami, and does so especially in his last 2 seasons to the tune of 19 wins over that time before he is shown the door. Obviously, Brian Flores' career also then involved a lawsuit against the NFL involving and alleging racial discrimination in a larger lawsuit there. He is now the defensive coordinator for the Vikings, so he is still an active coach in the NFL. And yet Tua Tagovailoa, when prompted by our friend Dan Le Batard to explain the difference between Brian Flores and the prior regime where Tua didn't feel like he was his best self versus Mike McDaniel and this current regime, had this to say.
Can you explain to us the difference in practical terms between having a coach who did believe in you the way that he did and the difference between that and what was happening with Flores?
Yeah, well, to put it in simplest terms, if you woke up every morning and I told you you sucked at what you did, that you don't belong doing what you do, that you shouldn't be here, that this guy should be here, that you haven't earned this right, and then you have somebody else come in and tell you, dude, you are the best fit for this. Like, you are accurate, you are the best whatever, you are this, you are that. Like, how would it make you feel listening to one or the other? You see what I'm saying? And then you hear it, regardless of what it is, the good or the bad, and you hear it more and more, you start to actually believe that. I don't care who you are. You could be the president of the United States. You have a terrible person that's telling you things that you don't want to hear, or that you probably shouldn't be hearing. You're going to start to believe that about yourself.
So Dad really didn't mince words at all. I mean, even dropped in, had a terrible person, at least loosely in reference to Brian Flores here. Were you surprised by how candid Tua was in discussing this as an active player with an active coach still in the NFL?
Yeah, and knowing Tua's personality too, I am a little surprised he went that far. But boy, he had to feel strongly about it. I mean, talk about, from his side, negative reinforcement. He was a guy in Tua whose father was very, very involved with him in training and in preparing for college and or really for all of football, high school, college, and the NFL. And so he didn't hold back. And it's interesting because the years with Flores, he actually had a better winning percentage. He was 13-8. Which is 61% winning percentage, as opposed to 19-11 with McDaniels, which is 57%. His completion percentage was just a hair better with McDaniel. Certainly thrown for way more yards and way more touchdowns. I mean, the passing game so opened up when he was with Mike McDaniel and what he's doing to the tune of 54 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. So the offense definitely opened up more, and it was a positive experience. We heard about the tape that McDaniel made for Tua, showing all the positive plays and a tape of like 700 plays. So definitely a different approach. And as we know, Mike, every athlete is different. Some respond better to a kick in the butt. Some respond better to a pat in the back. I mean, that's the way athletes are. And Brian Flores was a kick you in the butt kind of a coach. And it obviously didn't work as a head coach. Now he had obviously some litigious issues going on as well. But as a coordinator, we know what an absolute stud that he is. But it's just different likes for different folks on how, you are treated or how you are perceived or how you are talked to by a coach.
Yeah, it's one of those things, the record that's going to come up in all this. Like, Brian Flores was a coach that did so well in Miami. People were talking about the difficult job Mike McDaniel had coming in with that in the background, knowing everything that was baked into the end for Brian Flores, and one that people felt like was largely unjust in certain ways, that it was a difficult position Mike McDaniel walked into. I remember talking about how unenviable that was, and he's shined in spite of that, which is certainly a testament to him. So the win percentage thing, Dad, I sort of discount because Tua nowhere in here said we were a bad team because of it. He said his experience was lesser because of that. Yeah. And even if some of the stats are similar, Tua is telling us, hey, this was miserable for me. And the fact that we had such public reporting on a coach that felt the need to come in and show a 700-play highlight reel to a guy to help rebuild his confidence is kind of testament to that. So the winning stuff and the ultimate results, to me, I understand why people bring them up here to defend Brian Flores, but to me, they're irrelevant because this is about a singular experience. And you're absolutely right in that it's so interesting because I hesitate to go too far with this because I wasn't in this locker room and I don't know. We're getting one side of this right now, and it's not to discount Tua and say that I don't believe what he's saying. It's just out of fairness to the situation and knowing situations similar to this in the past. You can only know so much from looking where we all sit about the way that this was in the locker room there. But what I do know, Dad, in terms of what you described there, this hard coaching style, and everyone's going to make the Belichick coaching tree comparisons and all this stuff. I saw Marshall Newhouse had a great thread on this the other day. And it's true for the coaches that coached me like a hard ass. I talk about Harry Heastown on the show all the time. My favorite non-U coach in my entire football life, and the man that I probably learned more about football from than almost anybody. And he coached us incredibly hard and could because we knew he loved us and he wanted what was best for us. And that was the goal of everything that was about to happen. And so in my mind, it's really difficult for me to perceive a player feeling that comfortable coming out and saying something about a coach if that's the case. Like, it's not something you see often from players. It's very rare. So when it happens, we always are a little bit surprised. And so again, in general, my thought is always, hey, there's a fine line between hard coaching and demeaning. And that line usually is, hey, the players got to know you're in the foxhole with them and that you actually care about them. So the rest of that can be drowned out. And maybe it won't always be perfect. Different coaching styles do mesh up with different people, but that in general has always been the thing I've known to be true.
Yeah, and again, different players take things different ways. I mean, I would be interested to know if there are other players who played for that Miami team under Brian Flores that would come and speak out.
Tua did say that it wasn't just him in terms of players that were negatively affected like this. Now, to your point, I have not seen anyone put their name on it.
Right.
I've certainly not heard that yet. Maybe in the coming days we will hear that, but he did imply at least that it wasn't only him that was affected this way in the locker room, which again, like zooming back out, not specific to this situation, is to your point, Dad, just one of those things and a reminder when we always talk about quarterbacks specifically coming into this league, the landing spot they come into, the environment they come into. Not everyone's built for every style of coaching, and that is not an indictment of the player. I'm not doing the thing where we call Tua soft at all, and I'm not excusing if Brian Flores really overstepped the lines here. I'm just saying that even if you were to give this the most favorable read of the situation and say Brian Flores is just a hard ass and that's not the best way Tua receives coaching, that's okay. And that there are some people that might push the right way and get the most out of, and there are some that aren't. And recognizing you can't coach everyone the same is a huge part of leadership. To me, that's day one leadership stuff, is understanding what each guy needs. When we talked about leadership in the locker room, I always knew there are certain guys you put an arm around and there are certain guys you got to rattle the cage a little bit. And you got to figure out the difference by knowing your personnel. So again, I hesitate to say anything too specifically about this situation because it is so specific between two people I don't know in a locker room that I don't know. But again, these are the general things I do know about this situation that for the Miami Dolphins, Dad, still has led to wins with both of these people at the helm and Brian Flores and Mike McDaniel. But again, the experience here is what Tua is talking about. And I don't think there's any questioning that it's night and day for him here. And Mike McDaniel has been an overwhelm. He has been the coach that has met Tua exactly where he needed and brought him to the place he's wanted to go.
Yeah, he came in, he put his arm around Tua, where Brian Flores kicked him in the butt. You know, and like you said, there are different coaches out there. Hell, I had Buddy Ryan. I mean, my God. Right. I mean, Buddy was about as tough as could be. Had Jerry Glanville before that, who was a first-time head coach, but had the tough guy persona as well. So you just kind of used to it. You just kind of get used to that way of coaching. How you let it affect you is your business. And what Tua is saying, I get if you hear something over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, you know, maybe you start to believe it. And maybe Brian Flores' side was on trying to get you to come out of the other end of it, you know, and for lack of a better term, toughen up, you know, to my style of coaching. You know, and it just didn't work because coaches do need to learn the difference. They have their coaching style, but you have, you know, 53 in the NFL and more with practice players, different personalities on that team. Now, you can't sit there and morph to every person's needs. You still are going to coach your style and have players come along for the ride. You know, either, you know, if it's a loose coach and you have players used to a tougher coach, or if it's a tougher coach and players used to a looser situation, you have to come to some form of not agreement, but an understanding of this is how I coach, this is how I treat people, this is how I go about my business. So as a player, you choose how you let it affect you.
You do, and I think this is where people might be trying to draw the Belichick and the Patriot coaching tree connection. Right. Is that was an environment that was famous for treating the quarterback like everybody else, but we know and hear all the time in sports, sans that play. And again, Tom and Bill had a relationship. We know obviously it changed in latter years and Tom felt like he was due more respect in this process, but you still have to have the relationship as the bedrock to go and do that. And it's got to be specific to the player. That is what Tom Brady responded well to, at least early on, based on what we've heard. You don't have to treat everybody different, but Dad, we know the job of the coach in almost every sport is to connect with your star player and figure out what they need. And the quarterback of the franchise, you and him, your futures are tied together in lockstep if you're the head coach. And so if there is not an understanding of what he needs specifically and you try and force square peg in a round hole, that's where it can get a little bit dicey. And in general, Dad, it does feel like, now Brian Flores started to get results. Again, I want to hammer that home. This is not saying Brian Flores' coaching career wasn't successful in Miami, but this does lead to a larger conversation about one of the other things that's happened to Patriot assistants that's tended to be kind of universal is they've gone in and tried to operate operate at Patriot level in terms of the respect they believe the coach is owed without Bill Belichick's trophy case, without Bill Belichick's resume. And you know damn well when you do that as a player in the NFL or even as a coach, you got to earn it and show that you're supposed to be here before everyone's just going to fall in line and respect everything you say. That's not going to fly in a lot of places. With Brian Flores, it was a little bit different based on the result, but we have seen this hit a bunch of other former Patriot assistants where it hurts at their various head coaching stops.
Yeah, and you see entire teams being miserable. Like they talked about not having fun in New England, but when you win titles, that takes care of everything. Even though I know Lane Johnson said I'd rather win and have fun than win and not have fun. And listen, that's great when you have a ring. When you don't have a ring, you want to win a ring. And if it's a miserable experience, you'll deal with the miserable experience to get a ring. And that's how it was. And you're right, the assistants went out and they coached that way because that's the way they had been coached and they saw results. I can't really fault them for trying to coach that way because Bill's way showed results and got results. The difference was these assistant coaches weren't Bill Belichick and they tried to coach like Bill and they weren't Bill. And they didn't have the talent or the versatility that Bill's teams had and they failed. So it's a slippery slope for a head coach again, with so many different personalities. But to your point, you're correct. That quarterback's got to be a special relationship because you're tied to him. Normally, coach, GM, and quarterback are usually all tied together, depending on, if you drafted him, if you were the coach when he was brought in, and the different situations like that. But you are normally tied together. So there is one position that is separated from all the other positions, and that definitely is the quarterback position.
Yeah, we were not talking about Tua's success because, again, I understand win percentage here. I also understand our buddy Hembo, Paul Hembekides over at ESPN, made the point the other day. They also did trade for Tyreek Hill when this started to go very well for Tua Tagovailoa in Miami and put a bunch of quality weapons. Like, that is also a part of the equation we have to acknowledge from a football perspective. It's not all Brian Flores bad, all the results around him bad, Mike McDaniel universal good. This is a football. It's a complicated ecosystem. But in all of this, again, this is about Tua Tagovailoa's individual experience. Like, again, Dad, players speaking out. I heard Chris Canty ask this morning, what's the win for Tua in doing this? I'd imagine you've got to hate someone an awful lot to feel comfortable as an active player popping off like this in public on the cusp of the start of your season. Like, I don't know when they taped this with Tua, but he probably had an idea this could come out before a year where he's going to go out here and still be an active NFL quarterback. So again, knowing how antithetical this is to the way players usually operate, the feelings had to be pretty strong for Tua to feel like coming out and saying this was something worth all of the noise that's going to come from it.
Yeah, without a doubt. He felt strongly enough about it and had an outlet to actually talk about it and feel fine about talking about it. You're right. It is a little surprising, but as you said, bringing in Tyreek Hill was a huge difference maker. He was been sacked a few more times under McDaniel. Again, the stats are somewhat close except for the passing yards. He passed for almost 80 yards more per game under McDaniel, but that's what it turned into. It is interesting that he would make these comments because I've always taken him as kind of a quiet, keep him to himself kind of a guy. And not really that outgoing. Now, I don't know him. That could be wrong, but that's the gist I get.
I will say, Dad, when they went after Deshaun Watson at the trade deadline towards the end of that regime, he was pretty candid in how that affected him. When he wanted the contract extension, he was pretty candid about that in public. So this is a guy that I think as he's gone on has been a little bit more open about expressing himself publicly.
And it seems to affect his play when they were talking about the Deshaun Watson, and when that was over, when the trade deadline was passed, he started playing better. So wonder on Tua's side how much things get to him mentally in his head that affects his play.
Well, Tua seems to be the rare NFL star quarterback that operates like a human being and not a robot that just shuts everything out. Because we know they all hear some of it and they're all affected in some ways, but we very rarely get the window into this. And Tua Tagovailoa now at multiple stops has been willing to let us into that window. And that includes the comments he made about his former head coach and Brian Flores and the difference between him and Mike McDaniel now. Fascinating. We'll see if we hear any more follow-up from him. But coming up next, we had a head coach raise his hand in college and said, "Quit calling me." We'll tell you who it was and why next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. in this new and exciting, for some, world of college football. The transfer portal and NIL means the recruiting never stops, right? Especially for the players and agents. But Mike Gundy, he is over it. He is ready for football.
That's what I told the players. There's no negotiating now. Portal's over.
Right.
All negotiations history. Now we're playing football.
You can enjoy
Just coaching and playing football. Yeah, and the business side of what we do now is we have to have those conversations with them. Tell your agent to quit calling us and asking for more money. It's non-negotiable now. Start again in December. So now we're able to direct ourselves just at football, and that part is fun because there's been so much other stuff going on. It's been hard to really focus on football.
Okay, so he's ready to get to football. Is he right? Because in this day and age, it kind of seems like this stuff never really stops.
Yeah, Dad, it's worth noting in this that what he's talking about is agents hitting him up for more money for the guys that are already there and not guys threatening to transfer, because college football did look and say, hey, all this player movement, we understand why we've done all this and we're in this situation, but we need to corral it some, so we made the transfer portal windows. You've got that 30-day window in December right after the playoff teams are announced, or in the old version of the playoff they were announced, and then you've got that 30-day window around spring football where guys can transfer there, but then after that, you got to stay put. And so that you can't do. They can't transfer out. They can't sit or whatever. But there is nothing that stops their agents and their representation from asking for more money. And I think, Dad, that's still part of this new process that everybody is working out right now. And Mike Gundy, being as brash and blunt as he is, decided he's just going to say it in front of the media because that's how Mike Gundy operates.
And a guy who's been around for a while. Only Kirk Ferentz has been around longer than Mike Gundy and Kyle Whittingham from Utah, both Utah and Oklahoma State in the Big 12 now. So these two are, including Mike Gundy, are kind of coaches who have been around, and this has changed during their tenure. Not one of these young coaches who are kind of used to this new system now. And, we've seen his recruiting ranking go down some over the years. So you just wonder how it affects, I just don't want to blatantly put it in coaches who have been around a long time, but if they're just not into, the NIL and the portal and the functions of it, how much can that hurt them in the long run, and how much, you saw Nick Saban step away in part because of all the machinations in college football now. So now you have one of the long-standing coaches of all time, maybe just a little tired of it.
Yeah, well, and I think, again, it's just a new part of the process. Like, nowhere in there did Mike Gundy say, we're not going to pay players, period. He just said the negotiating period's over right now, and this might be a little lesson in leverage considering the players can't threaten to hop in the portal right now before the season because that's not available to them, and so your leverage to come in and ask for more money is not nearly the same. And yeah, Dad, this is a team that got gutted by the portal 2 years ago, has now gone a little bit more on the offensive with that, and listen, managed to keep their best player out of the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Like, I know part of that is Ollie Gordon personally, their star running back and Heisman Trophy, one of the Heisman Trophy favorites, not wanting to go. I saw quotes about him where he said, hey, this staff knows and has a plan to use me in a way that's going to allow us to be competitive, allow me to have a chance to win the Heisman. He's, by the way, playing behind an offensive line that might have more career returning starts than any offensive line in college football history, with 200 starts between the top 6 players and the top 7 who have all started games for this offensive line at different junctures. So there's reasons that might happen, Dad, but I think this is just Mike Gundy operating the way he normally does, which is with the cards up on the table. And like we hear with coaches all the time, using the media to send a message like, hey, I can have this conversation individually with all these agents that called me, or I can just say this once into the microphone and everybody's going to hear my stance on this. So it seems like an exercise in efficiency for him and just everyone getting used to the new space right here. As far as the space of college football overall, Jesse, let's take a look at some win totals here. Some of our boys around here at DraftKings have been doing some great work over on our website that you can check out looking ahead to the college football season.
Yeah, so we got you covered for everything you need for college football season, okay? Over on DKNetwork.com, we got our team working on best bets and all the info that you could possibly need. So let's see what our friend Julian Edlow is thinking about Oklahoma State's win total. So on DKNetwork.com, he's going heavy on the Cowboys to go over the 7.5 number. It's moved up to 8, so let's cash it or trash it. Cash it or trash it is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. So guys, how do we feel about 8 wins for Oklahoma State? Or maybe another Big 12 win total that you like?
Yeah, Dad, Oklahoma State's going to be an interesting one. They're one of the teams that I think is in contention for the college football playoff. We'll do our 4 Big 12 questions coming up in about 5 minutes here, so I won't dive too much into that. But I would say, especially if you could have gotten that number, I was a lot more comfortable with that number at 7.5 than I am at 8. Now, the push is in play, and I think they're at least an 8-win team, so I'd probably be comfortable with the over on that, or at the very least, knowing I'm not going to lose my money because I don't believe they're going to win fewer than 8 games.
Yeah, I think I would cash in on the over of that. Though early on, you look at the top 3 teams, and I know we'll get into the questions in the Big 12, Utah, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State. Well, Oklahoma State plays Utah September 21st and Kansas State September 28th. So back-to-back against the two of the prohibited favorites in the conference. So that's an early test right there. But I think they get through most, if not all, their other games. So I do go over on the 8, but that's a tough back-to-backer early on in the season.
Yep, it's an interesting one there, but a good number for you mentioned they're talked about in that same vein. Some people might have Kansas State and Utah a little bit above them. Utah at 9.5. I know it's a big number there, and it's probably not a ton of great value, but man, I think that Utah team, as long as Cam Rising stays healthy, is going to win the conference. They would be my pick, absolutely. And so over 9.5 would work there. Arizona, over 7.5. I know Jed Fish doesn't live there anymore, and you've got Brent Brennan coming over from San Jose State. But, Dad, you've still got one of the best quarterbacks in the conference right now walking in Noah Fafita, who was the Pac-12 Offensive Freshman of the Year last year, one of the best wide receivers in all of college football, and a defense that I still think is going to be a tough out.
Yeah, they held on to a good amount of their roster after Jed Fish left. Usually you see a mass exodus one way or the other, and they were able to hold on to that roster. So coming into the Big 12 now for their first year, Arizona State has a long way to go, but Arizona holding on to that roster, looking good into the upper part of the Big 12. So it'll be interesting the way it goes. I agree with Utah and Kansas. Kansas State's at 9.5 as well. I got to believe there's probably just going to be two Big 12 teams, a Big 12 champ, and then maybe one at-large team. I think it would be a 3-team battle between Utah. I think Utah wins the conference as well. Then Kansas State and Oklahoma State as far as that other team that would get in.
Yep. I mean, some of the other numbers that you look at in here, you mentioned, Kansas is going to come up. That number's moved up to 8 right now after a 9-win year last year where Jalen Daniels, their quarterback, wasn't healthy after the third game of the season. Like, they were able to go out there with Jason Bean and have that offense. Now, they lose Andy Kotelnicki, their offensive coordinator that's been there with Lance Leipold for a while, so we'll wait and see how that adjusts. But you have one of the better – Dad, this is one of the deeper quarterback conferences in college football in terms of the guys that they've got coming in from the former Pac-12 and some of the guys that were already there as well. You've got transfers coming in at like UCF too, where KJ Jefferson comes over from Arkansas. So there's a lot to get excited about.
You just hope Cam Rising can stay healthy. As he's going for his medical degree, he's been in college so long that he can stay healthy. And then teams, sitting at the bottom. Cincinnati's hard to believe. Cincinnati's over under is 5. Hard to believe this team was in the Final Four just a few years ago, and how they've fallen. It's been a rough go.
Team, one of the teams that people thought coming over to a Big 12 that was going to lose Texas and Oklahoma could maybe be poised to jump to the top of the conference. Instead, it's been a much more difficult dismount. Coming up next, we will get to our 4 big questions for the Big 4 conferences, zeroing in on the Big 12. Can Colorado actually make this thing interesting? Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Conference realignment means the Big 12 has seen some additions and some departures as the landscape of college football has changed, and that means we have some questions. 4 burning questions that we need to get to today. So guys, first question for the Big 12. With realignment shaking things up, will the conference miss Oklahoma and Texas as they bolt to the SEC? What do we think?
Well, yeah, Dad, I think they're certainly going to miss those two teams. I mean, the biggest brands in the sport, the biggest brands in the conference, the biggest brands in the geographical region. And I know that doesn't mean much to college football now, but at a point in time, the geography of the region and the conference you made up was a huge part of your identity. And Texas and Oklahoma, Red River, all that stuff was the identity. So it's a massive void to fill. Dad, the question I have is, who's in best position to fill the void? In the last segment, we kind of mentioned there were a bunch of different thoughts on this when you had a lot of the premier group of 5 teams like Cincinnati and Houston and UCF coming over. People thought, oh, Cincinnati, fresh off that appearance in the college football playoff, when this move got announced, maybe they might be able to go and take up the mantle here. We know that wasn't the case. So when you look around at the rest of who's here now, who do you think is best positioned to kind of take up that mantle for the head of the conference?
Oh, I think Utah. I mean, especially this year with Cam Rising, if he can stay healthy and that defense, they always have a tough defense. So I like Utah. I think it's between 4 teams: Utah, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Arizona. So a newcomer, obviously, in Utah and Arizona. Arizona coming in and as we just talked about in the last segment, hanging on to a lot of their roster. I don't know if you're necessarily filling the void of Oklahoma and Texas. They're such blue bloods involved in college football, but that's who I'm looking at the top.
Yeah, and I think, Dad, I think I want to zoom out even beyond just this year, because figuring out who can be the hook into this conference as they try and stay nationally relevant, as them in the ACC battle for who's third after the Big Ten and the SEC, and try and both, one, create interest in the conference, but also show that, like we talked about before, they can get a team in the playoff because they win the conference and maybe get another team, be a multi-bid league instead of just being one and done. And so I think Utah's certainly up there. Now, Kyle Whittingham has come out. Utah named the coach in waiting. Their defensive coordinator is going to take over for Kyle Whittingham when he's done. And based on some other comments Kyle Whittingham made, I think they play Miami, it was announced, to kick off the 2027 season. And he said, pretty frankly, I'm probably not going to be sitting in this chair for that game. His contract runs up until then. And so there's going to be the world beyond Kyle Whittingham, to your point, who beyond Kirk Ferentz, it's him and Mike Gundy in terms of tenure in the sport. And so I think they can hold it for that long. Defense has always been stable there. Life after Cam Rising, who's been there since the H.W. Bush administration, will be something to navigate. But overall, I think them and Dad, I mean, listen, Mike Gundy, we thought that core program was going to careen into a ditch after what happened last offseason for this team. And instead, they just decided to hand the ball off to their running back and go all in on offensive line and steadied the ship last year. So I think those two programs and probably Kansas State would jump out to me off the bat.
I think Kansas State, 37 wins in the last 3 years. They are breaking in a new quarterback this year, and a new offensive coordinator, as Colin Klein left for Texas A&M. But they've been consistent over the last 3 years. So that might be that there may be a few teams, looking to grab the mantle, atop the Big 12, a conference that we think will just get 2. I mean, would you say at times maybe 3, but basically 2 teams in the top 12?
Yeah, 2 probably seems like the safe bet at this point. 1 might even be on the table depending on how much this conference cannibalizes itself. So let's get to this year, Dad. You mentioned, and we both said, Utah's in great position to come in and do this right now. How worried are you about Cam Rising in year 7, coming off a season he missed entirely due to an injury suffered in the Rose Bowl the year prior, that they can hold on to him and get the best out of him long enough to get to the playoff that's eluded them?
Yeah, they kept thinking he was going to play last year, at some point, and then it would get pushed and finally just rehabbing again for this year. So, I mean, I'm fairly confident in modern technology today and the right amount of rest and rehab for it, that he could stay healthy. Between him and their always tough defense, I see them clearly as one of, if not the favorite in the Big 12. But I'm pretty confident that Cam can stay healthy.
Yeah, I that's my hope, because again, past injury, future injury, all the things that we already know. For Cam Rising, who's also not a statue in the pocket. He's a guy that'll move around and make things happen, but you're getting him back. You're getting Brent Keithy back, who, remember, before the Dalton Kincaid year in 2022, was the tight end of note in that room. He's the one that had made the transfer over and become extremely successful. So you get him back. On defense, you've got a couple of guys that you need to replace there, but I think they've got the guys to do that on the roster already. So I'm with you. I think that team, defense, a veteran quarterback, and a stable coaching situation are almost always recipes for teams you can trust early on in the season there. So Cam Rising in Utah, ready for their moment, provided everybody stays healthy. Yep. That should be a team that, again, back-to-back Pac-12 championships before last year when injury undid them. And the quarterback was just a non-compete on that team last year in the critical games for them. They were able to withhold it until that Oregon game where Oregon just plucked the wings off them. So now we'll wait and see. Dad, we got to ask a Colorado question in here. Are you buying or selling? I'll say improvement, because I know people want to ask, is Colorado going to be competitive for the Big 12 title? I just don't think that's realistic. Even with a great quarterback, even with Travis Hunter and some improved talent in important areas, they portaled in more O-linemen. They're going to have an offensive lineman that's a 5-star true freshman, probably starting for them this fall. So there's going to be more talent in certain areas. I still don't think we're even close to talking about Big 12 championship aspirations, but can they improve this season?
Their win total is 5.5, and I'm going under. I think they're a 5-win team. I think a good goal for them this year would be to make the bowls with 6 wins. I know some 5-win teams get into the bowls because there are so many and this and that, but sticking at the 6-win total for a bowl game, I think that would be a good goal for them. Obviously, they have Shedeur and Travis Hunter back, 2 monsters on offense, and the O-line has been revamped yet again. I just don't see the depth or the consistency for them to be able to compete, certainly not at a high level in this conference just yet. And then they're going to lose Shedeur and Travis, so we'll see where it goes after this year. But this year, I see it under 5.5. I see 5 wins, and I see a great goal for them would be 6 wins to become bowl eligible.
Right out of the gate, they got some physical battles. North Dakota State's, I think they're going to win that, but it's going to take their pound of flesh out of them. At Nebraska, at Colorado State, we remember how physical and borderline dirty that Colorado State game got last year. And then the home stretch of the season, Utah, at Kansas, Oklahoma State in the mix there. So plenty of stuff for them to have to navigate in the season. That, again, I'm with you. If they get to bowl eligibility, that's a huge win and a huge feather in the cap of Deion Sanders and company there. Dad, let's look at Darkhorse candidates for this team. We mentioned Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State probably feels like the trio most people would say have a real shot of winning the conference title in the way that you would bet on here. For the rest, UCF is 4th in the odds on DraftKings Sportsbook, a little bit ahead of Kansas, followed by Iowa State, Arizona, Texas Tech, and then you get into Virginia, TCU, and the rest of the conference there. So is there any team you're keeping an eye on that could make this interesting?
Yeah, I'm looking at Iowa State. They had the gambling scandal, and then they had the freshman come in at quarterback, Rocco Becht, who ended up being the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. They always have a tough defense. So for Matt Campbell's team, I think their win total was 7.5. I can look back real quick. I think it's 7.5, which seems about right. I think they can go over that, provided, they play out in a few games. But I kind of like what they have. Young quarterback, proven already, and good, solid defense. So as far as the also-ran teams, I kind of like them.
Yeah, I would say Big 12 Offensive Freshman of the Year. You're right. Rocco Becht was awesome last year. Yep. That's still a team that feels like it needs another gear. The defense is always going to be there. I'd still go Arizona because, again, veteran quarterback, NFL wide receiver, and a defense that structurally is going to be the same. And then I'm watching out for Kansas, man. If Jalen Daniels can stay healthy all year long, I get it's a new coordinator. You got a pair of 5-star edge rushers coming in that are going to be able to help you out on defense. Offensively, you're going to have the school's all-time leading rusher, soon to be probably in your backfield. I just think that's a team that's been knocking on the door, and if they can stay healthy at the right time, things could get real interesting in Lawrence, Kansas this year.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. Okay, USA men, right? In basketball, we took home gold. We also took home gold in the Twitter streets, if you will. Kevin Durant, Twitter god, snagging us gold in the Twitterverse. It all started with some comments from German point guard Dennis Schroeder. Listen to what he had to say.
European basketball, I think, is the more, I gotta be careful here. I think it's European basketball is no entertainment. It's straight IQ basketball, straight coaching, and really, really high IQ guys who know how to play the game.
Okay, so then after Team USA won gold, Kevin Durant, from his main account, tweeted out two simple words: entertainment and IQ, with the team flaunting their gold medals. He got him, right, guys? I mean, come on. KD, Twitter god.
Dad, you know what it was? It was fine to me. Like, it was like, I appreciated that from Kevin Durant because, as we know, athletes, especially like Kevin, have rabbit ears, hear and see everything. And that is a guy in direct competition with you over here in the Olympics, saying that about USA basketball. And so to go out there and use that moment to just deliver a very simple message. He didn't spend time in a diatribe on this the way we'll get to that Dennis Schroeder has now in response with the TLDR response to everything that Kevin Durant said. So I loved the tweet from KD. You roll your eyes a bit.
And I didn't have a problem with the Schroeder sound. I didn't. I mean, he said, I got to be careful how I say this. He went on to say Serbia, Greece, Spain, France, Germany. I mean, so many teams out there who know how to play, who's athletic. I think a lot of people from Europe in the NBA make some noise. I didn't have a problem with what he said. He even tried to say, I need to be careful how I say this, and talking about the difference. We talk about the difference in FIBA basketball and NBA basketball. I didn't think it was that much of a diss. I really didn't. But for KD, I was happy KD kept it simple. Just the picture, IQ, and entertainment, and then Schroeder's answering back. That he didn't need to do. That he just needed to let that one go. But I think he was trying to basically say, I didn't mean any disrespect by it, though Durant took it that way. So Schroeder's first comments and Durant's first tweet, I really didn't have an issue with.
No. It all seemed like what happens. This is Bleep Talking 101. And Dad, I think, and I'd be curious for a basketball player to answer this question, because in the football world, we know the four-letter word is when you call somebody soft. That's the thing you can't come back from. And once you get that, being called a low IQ basketball player, which was essentially what the insinuation was by Dennis Schroeder, it's a reason he tiptoed up to the line, because he understands what he's about to say is going to hit and strike a nerve. That is kind of the thing that feels like the four-letter word there. So it felt like that. But for Dennis Schroeder to come out after, when he was asked about this tweet, in a way that didn't need to happen. Like, this just feels like, hey, when you talk crap and you go out there and say something, athletes we know are looking for every possible edge. It's not like Kevin Durant held the press conference and talked about this. Right. He sent a tweet that had 2 words and then an article in the middle. I said 3 words originally. I guess the N symbol doesn't count as a word. But Dennis Schroeder coming out after the fact and saying, you know what, Kevin Durant, not everyone can be strong. And you know, the way he responded here, you're to be that famous and to go and respond to someone like me with that just shows the kind of guy there. Like, it was ridiculous to me that Dennis Schroeder tried to come out and act like, because Kevin Durant fired off a tweet, and a pretty simple one, which is what Kevin Durant does, that now all of a sudden Dennis Schroeder can claim some high ground here after his team got bounced.
Schroeder said, you're the type of star, you have to say something to a person like me who not even meant it to be negative. It was just what I see from both sides. I didn't appreciate it. I don't care. But at the old I don't care, but then I go on. I don't care, but at the end of the day, that tweet or whatever he posted was because of me. For me, it was never no negative stuff. I respect all those guys, all GOATs, but for him to say tells me how weak of a person he is. Yeah, that really wasn't needed, I don't think, by Schroeder. I think that went a little one too far. You know, when he's saying something to a person like me, you're in the NBA, dude, okay? You're an NBA player. You're a European player in the NBA. So it's one of Kevin Durant's peers who is saying, you know, that Kevin Durant plays in a league with a lower IQ. Again, I didn't have a problem with how he said it in his comparison of European ball and NBA ball. But yeah, I was a little surprised. I was actually surprised that Durant's initial response of just the picture at IQ and Entertainment was kind of as mild and succinct as it was without going in, because Kevin could be pretty sensitive, to things and go into prolonged tweets.
That's a poster that has aged incredibly well. And Kevin Durant, over time, has become the perfect weapon of the internet because he matches a stellar resume with the desire to go on there and battle it up with anyone. We've seen Kevin Durant go back and forth with people in his comments all the time. And Dad, as someone that lives online, one of the things you encounter often from commenters is the minute you shine a light on it and respond, you get the response of, well, you got all these followers, or you do this, that, the third. Why are you responding to someone like me? The fact that Dennis Schroeder used internet commenter defense is such a weird self-own in all of this, to put down your own status as one of Kevin Durant's peers just because you don't like the thing that he tweeted about you here is wild to me, and clearly a sensitivity fine. Like, we talk about sensitivity being fine in plenty of regards. In this case, to respond like this, like, nah, man, you're pointing the camera back at yourself in terms of the person that's responded weirdly in this situation. The irony of this, by the way, coming in a tournament where we talk about the European mind can't comprehend the entertainment of U.S. basketball, like Bogdan Bogdanovic during Serbia's game against Team USA made the tournament by going over and hitting the 3 to the dome to Carmelo Anthony on the sideline, who did come out and say, that's my guy. He was paying homage to me. I loved it, but couldn't show it in that moment because it's USA, USA, USA. Like, Europe was putting on. Serbia was incredibly entertaining basketball in addition to the IQ. We can all do both.
Yep. Yeah, you can have both. No doubt about it. You can have both. It was, and for Schroeder, again, he's someone who knows. Kevin Durant is on social media. Doesn't have the burner. Well, at least we don't think has a burner anymore because he's answering stuff through his own name.
He might. Plenty of people have burners. I've seen plenty of people cop having burners for different reasons.
Yeah, he may, but he's answering things on his own here and putting his name to it. And for Dennis, I mean, he's got to know that Kevin Durant is out there answering tweets, whether it be to normal fans or to ball players. Again, he's your peer. Your guys are in the same NBA league together. He's your peer. Of course he's going to have, especially a guy like Durant who talks so much on Twitter, he's going to have an answer to you.
This is an exercise in self-reflection. You have to have an honest assessment of yourself before you're going to walk into the arena and say things that could be perceived in a certain light. I always said this when it came to guys. Like, I had guys and new guys that could go out during the week and party and be ready for game day and be fine. Like, you got to know I am either that guy or I am not that guy. And anyone who has that lack of self-awareness, that's where you're going to find yourself in a bit of trouble. In this case, you got to know, am I a guy that is built for the fire of going up against one of the premier internet trash talkers? And if you're not, don't wander into the comment section, man. That is not where you need to be. You need to be in the lab doing really high IQ basketball stuff, throwing nice bounce passes and setting up your teammates for success, all those things. So it was a really weird cap to what had been a tremendously entertaining Olympic run of international and U.S. basketball.
And again, I didn't mind his comment. It wasn't a Twitter comment. It was a press conference comment. So I didn't mind it. But then jumping into the Twitter universe was definitely his mistake. The comment I thought was fine. And you knew Kevin Durant was or you didn't know, you had to know that he was going to answer, but then just stay out of it. Just to stay out of it, said that was weak by him. No, not really.
You know what was weak by you? Losing. Your team lost in the tournament, and might makes right in this case. Kevin Durant won the trophy and won the medal, and so they get to talk their crap at the end. And until someone's going to come out there and beat him, which, listen, based on the trajectory of France, could be the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. We have no idea. That team looks like it could be very good and very scary and full of really tall, talented French basketball players that could make this conversation a little more interesting. But for now, Kevin Durant gets to sit on the mountaintop and talk his stuff.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. As is usually the case with former Patriots, we usually get the story about what went down with contracts and whatnot after the fact. So now that he's with Atlanta, Matthew Judon went on NBC Sports Boston and gave us a little insight as to why it didn't work out with New England.
I don't know. I feel like we just never sat down and really came to the table as men. So I think that's the biggest point. It's like they kind of didn't know where I was at. We kind of didn't know where they was at. It was like, it was just always through text message or phone calls. We just never sat down and actually talked about it. I think that was the biggest kind of disconnect.
Did you ask to? Did you, talk to some of the front office, Elliott, et cetera, say, like, let's have a sit-down conversation about this, your agent?
For sure, I asked. And I sent those messages to my agents, and I asked personally. But that ain't kind of where we left off.
So, Patriots literally did not come to the table on this one. Not exactly a tactic I think they teach you at GM school. I don't know. I've never been. But what did you guys think about hearing this, that they just didn't even entertain it, just sitting down with him at all?
Yeah, well, Dad, I was a little bit surprised that there was that reported lack of engagement between the two sides here. I'm not going to lie.
I guess I'm not as shocked with Bill Belichick was known for letting a player go before you had to pay him big time, right? He's done that before, and then sometimes you get that player back for a cheaper amount in free agency after they're gone for a couple of years. I don't think that'll be the case here with Judon, who's, I believe, 32 years old. I just think, Mike, this was a situation where Judon all along basically said, I'm going to play on this contract, but I'm just looking for a bump, to where, again, the business side took over for New England and was basically like, well, why are we going to give him any more money? We're in a rebuilding process, so why are we going to put money into an older player? When they kind of did with their D-tackle, Godchow and Andrews, an 8-year guy and a 10-year guy. But, you make your choices. And with Judon, who was coming off of an injury and played just 4 games last year, I think they were like, well, we know he's going to play on his deal. He'll just play on his deal, and then if we lose him after that, we lose him. But I don't think they wanted to put any new money into it. And this is something Bill had done over the years.
Yeah, and I guess we're learning just how similar the bones of this organization still are to then. Even if it's Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo pulling the strings now, we had heard, hey, Gerard Mayo, you thought he might be a player's coach, actually a little bit more like Belichick than you'd imagine, which isn't surprising given how close those two seem to be for so long. But to see it play out here, because, Dad, we also got a little bit of window to this when Matthew Judon had his introductory press conference with the Falcons. And listen, coming over in a trade like this, we talked about this a lot in other instances with Hassan Reddick right now in the New York Jets, where, hey, when you trade for a player who's on a deal they don't like, usually that's done with the understanding that there's going to be a new agreement that you come to there. The player walks in with a fair amount. Like Matthew Judon, if he wanted to, could have not reported for his physical and made this situation really complicated. And instead, he said, and this is, I think, a little window into kind of how he viewed this situation, is the Atlanta Falcons know nothing about me as a football player and about me as a man. They really know my previous resume, so I can't really demand or ask for anything yet. I haven't worked for it, and that's where I've been my whole life, so I'm going to work for it. Basically saying he chooses to play out his current contract with this team because in his mind, with his relationship with this organization, he hasn't earned it yet, which is a fine sentiment, but to me, more Dad says, hey, the situation in New England, we know each other. I've done stuff for you in this Patriot uniform in my mind, and I'm not saying in a practical business sense for an NFL team it makes sense, but you know how players think. Hey, I've gone out and I put my body on the line for you and been a huge reason why this defense was successful based on my production. I feel like we know each other well enough to where we shouldn't be having this conversation we are right now, and with Atlanta, it's a new lease and feels invigorated enough to want to go out there and go to bat this season, which I thought was an interesting window into his version of how he views this relationship in football.
Got to New England in 21, had 12.5 sacks, 22 had 15.5 sacks, and then just played 4 games last year, but it had averaged a sack a game in those 4 games with four sacks. Again, at 32, but still a pretty good rusher. I don't think the win rate is as high as some people would like, but he was getting the sacks. I think, Mike, I think he took it personal in New England. Hey, you've known me, you've seen me produce, and now you're not going to give me the extra money. I definitely think he took it personal. Something that is easier said than done not to, is to understand it's a business and you're in a business relationship. Hence, when he tried to go out on the field and not work out and just sit on a flipped trash can, and Jerod Mayo looked like they had an animated conversation, and Judon left the field, then came back to talk to the GM and player personnel person. So it just, I think he just felt like, I think he felt it was kind of personal, that I've shown you what I can do. Why aren't we sitting down? Why aren't we doing more to keep me here?
And I will always say, I get it, because one side is negotiating with money and the other side is negotiating with their actual physical body. Matthew Judon felt his body give out for him last year, the tool that has helped him earn the money that's going to feed his family for generations to come. And so, yeah, I understand why players more often than not do take this stuff very personally. And so now he goes down for a team and goes down for the Atlanta Falcons that we're also, listen, this is about the position every team's in. The New England Patriots aren't going to be good this year. I think they know that. I think they're planning for a future where that's the case. Yeah. The Atlanta Falcons kind of need to be good this year because of the way their bank account's set up. They got a checkings and a savings, and all their money right now is in the checking account and out of the savings and in Kirk Cousins' bank account. So they need this thing to go pretty well. Their defense was not good last year. Matthew Judon, Justin Simmons, all these things can, in theory, make that better in a hurry there. So it makes sense why Atlanta would be willing to take this on, but him and Matthew Judon saying that is a mindset I wouldn't have expected from someone who seems so about his business in New England, but we're finding out, like you said, this is more personal, I think, than it is business.
Yeah, and it's not costing a lot. What's he, $6.5 million is his salary? I'm not sure what the actual cap number is. It's a little more than that, but it's not detrimental, to a $20 to $25 million hit that other high sacking edge rushers are getting. So Atlanta is not out a lot of money here at all. They brought in help with Justin Simmons and with Matthew Judon, but aren't paying a lot of money for it, which, I don't know their money situation, but bringing in talented vets who they're hoping to get another year or two out of, while they have Kirk Cousins, who they're probably hoping to get another year or two out of.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the situation in Atlanta, and the timeline. They're drastically different than what we're talking about in New England, which is why it's interesting, Jesse, the comments that we got from Jerod Mayo concerning their quarterback situation the other day. Obviously, Atlanta's also got a rookie on the roster in Michael Penix that they famously took in the first round and shocked everybody, but New England drafted their future at quarterback in Drake May, but so far he has not been their presence up till this point in training camp, although Jerod Mayo seems to be leaving the door open for that.
Yeah, here Jerod Mayo talking about what may be a quarterback competition.
Yeah, we always have to be willing to, flexible in regards to the plan. Right now, it's all going the right way, right direction, and hopefully he continues to get better. He made some good throws, and I would say his teammates can see that confidence growing as well. And hopefully it's just an upward trajectory from here.
With 3 weeks to the regular season, do you know who your starting quarterback will be? And if not, when do you want to lock that down?
No, we still don't know right now. We have another preseason game and a week after that. When I know, I'll let you know.
Making comments to the media about a possible quarterback competition, Belichick could never and would never. Guys, sounds like Mayo's leaving the door open here for May, even though Brissett's been taking most of the reps with the first team offense. My question is basically, why are you even saying this to the media?
Well, I think one, Dad, is, Jerod Mayo's figuring out who he is as a head coach. We've heard from reporters around there. He's been much more candid about a lot of things than Bill Belichick, even if some of the business sense is still Belichickian inside that building. The way he goes about the day-to-day is certainly different, and some of that reeks of former players. So, and part of it also it might be true, Dad. What we saw in the last preseason game, Drake May looked better than in the prior preseason game. I think the numbers were 6 of 11 overall for 47 yards, took 1 sack in that game, but you could see looked more comfortable. Apparently in the practices since then, the reports out of camp are that he's looked more confident and more comfortable. And so I wonder, and I said this the other day, if there's a thought of, hey, if we're going to be bad this year, getting him on the field sooner than later so we can work through with live action some of the things he needs to improve on and try and get that through the crucible of a game. The offensive line complicates that, but it's at least a strategy. What say you?
It's all the comfort level of Drake May. Jacoby Brissett, and he knew it, is a placeholder, and it's just a matter for how long. If Drake May looks comfortable when they're practicing against other teams, in preseason games, when he doesn't, if he doesn't have a deer in a headlight look, if he's making the proper reads, then I've always been of the ilk. Get a quarterback out there, get his eyes watered and his nose bloodied, get him learning the system, as long as it doesn't go too far like a David Carr back in the day when he got obliterated because there was no O-line in Houston and he held the ball as a rookie too long at times, and it just ended up awful. I am a firm believer in getting a quarterback out there and getting him reps, and I don't think he's going to start the season. I think Jacoby Brissett will, and we know the team is not going to be very competitive, so it's more going to be on not a matter of, okay, we're not competitive anymore, let's see what we get out of Drake May. It's going to be, do we feel Drake May can handle the offense at an optimum level to start his learning curve? That's when we're going to put him in. So I still think we're waiting for that, and I don't think it'll be the start of the season.
Yeah, Dad, I always go back and forth on the play him early, play him not. I think my general demeanor is like you. Hey, if you've got an opportunity to get your guy on the field, the only way you get better at football is by playing football, and we go forward there. There's obviously the debate about sitting quarterbacks early in their career and where it can benefit you. And I think we saw with Bryce Young last year, there is also, is the team ready for the quarterback? I agree. I think Jacoby Brissett starts the season, and you got to kind of look and see, is this offensive line going to be able to protect the quarterback? Is anyone going to be able to get open? Because again, the last thing you want to do is go out and tank your gun quarterback's confidence in year one. Yep. We know and have seen guys rebound. We know the stats about Peyton Manning leading the league in interceptions and the record of his rookie year and all that stuff on and on down the list, but there was also still some success to point to, whereas this, if it goes bad and you're getting beat up and no one's open and you're throwing the ball to the other team, that instills a lot of bad habits that we've seen. Other quarterbacks in this league takes a while to rewire.
It's taking a while to rewire is a good way to put it, is what bad habits you get and how quickly you can get out of the bad habits. Though we have seen some positive examples of quarterbacks sitting for a while. Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, two on the same team in Green Bay, and come out and still perform incredibly well. And with the best quarterback in the NFL right now, Patrick Mahomes sat his first year behind Alex Smith, didn't play, took over that next year to my now famous "No way on God's green earth" quote that I was so wrong about. But he came in and just destroyed, right out of the gate. So you can, and every quarterback is different, you don't know, but you can have quarterbacks that can sit and wait their turn and come out and be awesome right out of the gate. But time will tell with Drake May.
Yeah, I think overall this is encouraging to hear this from Jerod Mayo because it means Drake May is progressing as camp goes along. You're seeing improvement on and on down the list. So I do think for a coach that seems to be pretty candid about what's going on with his players, that's a positive sentiment coming out of Patriots camp, especially coming off this last preseason game. Dad, less so as we shift gears, as always, to the Dallas Cowboys. We're on today's episode of As the World Turns. Jesse, we've got more social media messaging being sent by star players, this time from CeeDee Lamb with a dated Spider-Man reference. How about that?
Yeah, so he posted on his IG story the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man putting on the sinister Spider-Man suit. So no idea what that means, okay? I don't know. He's going sicko mode. I don't know. I'm scared. But as we all know, IG posts, Twitter posts, all of this, basically gospel. GoJo, can you interpret this for us? Like, what does it mean?
It means, Dad, that he might have to become something he doesn't necessarily want to in order to get the job done. But it might also feel a little bit good at the same time. That was a weird Spider-Man movie. It gave us a lot of meme content. But overall, Dad, CeeDee Lamb seems committed to sticking to this. And I think the interesting thing, I was listening to, David Hellman, who's been on with us, is kind of I call him my Cowboys interpreter. What's real or what's not in Cowboys land? And the line from him and from most people who seem in the know has always been, hey, the Cowboys are going to get this done with CeeDee Lamb. They are hard-headed, but they're not dumb, and they're not going to let this guy walk out. That being said, I want to just throw this out there on the off chance it doesn't, because I feel like we discuss player holdouts and sitting out as a binary, where it's, well, no player is going to sit out the entire season the way we saw Le'Veon Bell do something akin to that in Pittsburgh when he was trying to get his money. But we are exactly 1 year removed from Chris Jones deciding to sit out from the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs' first game on opening night against the Detroit Lions in an effort to secure his financial future. And while it didn't necessarily work out for him, because that defense went and actually performed pretty well without him on the road against a really good offense in Detroit, it was still a choice that he made and was comfortable making. And Dad, the Dallas Cowboys play the Cleveland Browns week 1. A Cleveland Browns team that is right now on paper probably the best defense in the NFL, considering everything the Baltimore Ravens lost from last year. And so I feel like if CeeDee Lamb, if Dallas really wanted to play hardball, CeeDee Lamb sitting out week 1 against that Browns team, I think would be catastrophic for that offense heading into the year. An offense that's going to start probably 2 rookies in Cooper Beebe at center and Tyler Guyton at left tackle on an offensive line, going up against Myles Garrett already, and a Cleveland secondary that, when healthy, is an absolute man-to-man lockdown unit. So I do feel like that is on the table in a way we probably haven't discussed enough as a public.
Yeah, and then, we talked about the leverage game, right? Where Chris Jones was in the building. He watched his team lose by a point. Remember, Travis Kelce was out of that game as well, hyperextended his knee earlier in the week, and thought, oh, does the leverage go to the side of Chris Jones now? You're playing the leverage game, for a team in Kansas City who expects to be in the Super Bowl every year. You start out 0-1. Turns out your defense turned out to be the better part of your team this year, and Chris Jones was a big part of it. But that's the game you start to play. And there is no doubt that this Cowboy team lacks the depth of talent than the Kansas City team did. So if CeeDee Lamb is sitting that Browns game, I agree. I mean, that is a great defense, and your main star would be sitting. I've gone over ad nauseum about a guy sitting at a prime position like that, a Ferrari position, about getting nicked up. So we'll leave that. I've already mentioned that. But doing this, I mean, he shouldn't have to. I mean, this is, we keep saying, oh, they're going to get it done. Oh, they're going to get it done. Well, we're a couple of weeks from the start of the season, and they're not getting it done. They're not getting it done. This should be done. This should be an easy one to do. So, and I don't get the memes. Your explanation is fine. He's going to turn into a little villain at times. Okay, whatever. That's how the players communicate now. But I can see that working to his advantage. For sure, if he misses that Cleveland game, I already think Dallas has taken a step back this year. And now we got to see what Deshaun Watson does for Cleveland. But just that defense against CeeDee Lamb, a CeeDee Lamb less Dallas offense would, I think, be brutal, because they have no running game either. It would be a brutal attempt. So, yeah, I do think that would help his leverage if it gets that far, and there's no reason for it to get that far.
No, it's a great reminder. We shouldn't be. I'm not even supposed to be here, is how we all feel right now watching CeeDee Lamb not get a contract extension in the NFL for a Dallas Cowboys team where he was overwhelmingly the leader in receptions and targets and literally every meaningful receipt. Like, we've gone over and over and over again, Dad, and I understand. It's money. We talked about business, but this is bordering on absurd. The fact that you weren't ready for this guy.
It is. He's done everything. You get a high pick and you get him to perform like this. This is exactly what you want, and you know exactly you're going to have to pay him. And basically the blueprint of the contract has been done with Justin Jefferson, even a little below or a little below or above, probably below. It's been done. I mean, it's right there for you, Jerry. Enough leaves have fallen off the trees to get this deal done, especially at the wide receiver position. The leaves have fallen off the trees on this. Man, it's crazy.
I would not describe this situation as very demure, very mindful, very considerate. Coming up next, we'll see what NFL situations we would, and if my dad understands any of this in Golic versus the Internet.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Here's an internet trend that there is no chance that Senior will understand, but perhaps if we put it into football terminology, perhaps that will help. But here's the TikTok before we get into that started it all. Pay attention, Senior, okay? Demure.
You see how I do my makeup for work? Very demure, very mindful. I don't come to work with a green cut crease. I don't look like a clown when I go to work. I don't do too much. I'm very mindful while I'm at work. See how I look very presentable? The way I came to the interview is the way I go to the job. A lot of you girls go to the interview looking like Marge Simpson and go to the job looking like Patty and Selma. Not demure. I'm very modest. I'm very mindful. You see my shirt? Only a little chichi out, not my chocho. Be mindful of why they hired you. Here's your reality check, diva. What's the name you'd like me to make it out to?
All right, that last line is a bar, and I will be using that one going forward. Here's the reality check. Who do I make it out to here? But yes, for another round of Senior which honestly, it was usually Golic Senior versus the internet. Dad, I am actually with you where I have not fully understood this trend. TikTok has turned me into an old person much faster than I was ready for here. And so, but you've seen everywhere across the line right now, very demure, very mindful. What's the other one, Jesse? You actually understand that in a way that I don't.
Yeah, very cutesy. So we're kind of going to just like use this to decide if NFL stuff is demure. So Senior, listen, I know you don't really get this. It's kind of a joke by this creator.
Do you even know what demure means, Dad?
Well, yeah, I know what demure means. It's to be respectful, right? Kind of show respect, to be kind of quiet.
Yeah, it's like
don't
reserved,
attract attention
modest.
to yourself.
Modest,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, this isn't a new word, gang. This isn't an invented word. Demure has been around for a long time. So we're looking at a meme of somebody explaining a word that's been around forever. Okay, we know what demure means. Okay,
well, Senior,
so why all of a sudden is this a trend on TikTok? Somebody explaining the word demure, which
she
has
wasn't
been
explaining
around.
the word demure. She was explaining how she presents herself at work using demure as a descriptor. And the reason it popped is because you're right, it is not a word that has been made up recently. It's just a word that people my age and younger do not use very frequently. And so now all of a sudden with demure back in the lexicon, things start to pop. So to Jesse's point, in a way to better illustrate this, we're going to try and use some NFL examples and figure out if they fall into these categories of very demure, very mindful, very cutesy, and see what they have to work. Is that about right, Jesse?
Yes, that's exactly what we're doing. Also, Senior, that was amazing the way you just said it was like a meme of someone described. That wasn't a meme. We'll just help you out with that later, okay? But let's start with Travis Kelce. How demure was he when he was describing the behind-the-back play during the game?
It wasn't a play. No, it was a play. It's a first down. You know, he's got the voice thing, and so he kind of mumbled out the play. I couldn't hear it. I was walking up to the line. I was like trying to decipher what he was saying. Before I knew it, he snapped the ball, and and then I kind of saw him out of my peripheral run to the sideline. So I was trying to go help my guy out. By the time I looked over there, he was already in mid-form, like a photo on a sports card.
Senior, I'm going to help you out really quick here for a second. The demure trend is kind of running itself as the opposite of being brat. So we kind of have brat on one side, demure on the other. So was this demure? What do you think, Senior?
Was this demure or brat?
Yeah.
Well, I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was demure and how he kind of quelled it a little bit, but it was, God help me, it was kind of bratish when he said he has the froggy voice where I didn't understand the play call. So a little bit of demure and a little bit of brat. God help me. I hate this segment. I hate that we're doing this.
Honestly, I think he kind of nailed it,
Yeah.
Jesse. I don't have any notes.
No
you got
notes.
this right.
That was amazing.
This is like in the debate scene in Old School when Will Ferrell blacks out and gives a coherent analysis of the geopolitical state of things. That's what Dad just did with this. Jesse, keep going and give us the next one. I don't want to stop this train.
Yeah, so Dan Quinn naming Jaden Daniels the starter for week 1, and he praised Daniels for hitting all the benchmarks, but he did have a specific shout out for the backup here.
he's really put in the work while being surrounded by some excellent teammates here. And in that case, I wanted to make sure I singled one of them out. In a perfect scenario, a young QB would, have a leader to also learn from, but perfect rarely happens. But we do have that in Marcus Mariota. And him sharing 9 years of gold with Judon, I think, has been something that's really cool for us to see. Rookie QBs usually don't get that, and we do. And when QB rooms are special, that energy can be felt throughout an entire team, and we have that. So really cool to say. So apologies for having you come up with new storylines for today, but Jayden Daniels is our starting quarterback.
Senior, what do you think? I mean, Dan Quinn showing up to the presser, very mindful, very considerate.
I mean, again, I hate that I'm doing this, but he was demure. The spotlight was supposed to be on Jayden Daniels, but he kind of kept it off Jayden Daniels for a while by showing Marcus Mariota the respect of being a leader in that quarterback room, and then finished on, but Jayden Daniels is our starter. So he kind of covered all the bases. He showed some respect. He didn't attract attention to himself. It wasn't about him. But he was polite in the way he dealt with naming the starter, but giving the backup some kudos for leading a good quarterback room. And again, God help me, and for you guys doing this to me.
Very demure.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely right, though. This is the most demure answer we'll probably hear all season long from a coach talking about a player on this team. And it's great for Jayden Daniels and for Washington that he has progressed to this point as quickly as he has. All of the reviews since he got to that building have seemed to be rave reviews about the way that he has digested information at this level. And it's not surprising because those are the same things that Brian Kelly and the LSU staff said about him from year 2 to year 3 and the changes that he made in his game there. So certainly not surprising it's gotten to this point. Marcus Mariota does seem like a great vibes guy that would certainly endear himself in this way to a coaching staff. So good job, very demure all around. Dan Quinn going out here and managing his quarterback room in the way especially a defensive head coach knows how to do. Jesse, let's get to one final one here. Kirk Cousins, I have a feeling I already know how this goes.
Yeah, so it was his birthday yesterday, and the Falcons gave him the aux cord in honor of his B-Day. So we got to look at his birthday playlist. Senior, what do we think of this playlist? Was it very demure? What do we think?
Oh, I have no idea what 90% of the songs are. I know Mr. Brightside, obviously, but I have no idea what the songs are. I have no clue. No clue.
Yeah.
I'll step in on this one for you because this is very demure, very mindful, and extremely, extremely white man of a certain age. These are all songs. Kirk Cousins, 36 years old. I'm going to be 35 in September, so we're more or less the same age here. This is every song that middle school Mike Golic Jr. listened to at some point. Now, I will say it is largely a perfect list, starting with Jimmy Eat World, the middle, finishing with Ocean Avenue by Yellow Card. There's Mr. Brightside in the middle there. There's Foo Fighters in the middle there. There's more Fall Out Boy, Maroon 5 mixed in. The only thing, and Jesse, you can back me up on this or not, that would have improved this, we got to some of it at the end with Yellow Card. Could have used a little more emo. If you throw Welcome to the Black Parade in this by My Chemical Romance or any of their other bangers, you might have taken this to the supernova level.
Yeah, I agree. Very demure, very mindful, very considerate. I will say when I get to Mr. Brightside, the brat is coming out. I don't know how else to explain it. It's demure, considerate, cutesy, brat. Continuing on with being demure and mindful.
I would say the anthem by Good Charlotte, also brat, punk rock, and especially that variety of it, very brat.
And just who I am when I hear Mr. Brightside is very brat.
What is emo again?
Oh, God.
What is emo?
It's just emotional. It's just we couldn't be bothered to say the other words on the end of that.
Yeah, it's when GoJo would go to his room and listen to music and, like lay in his bed and cry. Do you remember that?
It's when I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to see the marching band and said, grow up, will you be the savior of the broken, the beaten, and the damned? Christian Gonzalez from the Patriots joining us next on GoJo and Golic.
Oh.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Hoping to talk to Patriots star cornerback Christian Gonzalez in his second year, coming off a shoulder injury in his rookie season that started off incredibly full of promise. Super talented former first-round pick out of Oregon. Hopefully getting a chance to talk to him here again. Live bullets, practice, all these things that go on with the NFL season, so we understand and appreciate him taking out some of his time here. But, Dad, before he sits down, I saw this story yesterday, first reported on by 24/7 Sports, about something going on at Alabama football. We've talked so much about Nick Saban retiring, stepping down, Kalen DeBoer stepping in. But the sport is changing a lot, and we might not just be reading the head coach's name soon when we talk about the success of a program and people in leadership spot. Because it was reported that Alabama football has re-signed General Manager Courtney Morgan to a new precedent-setting 3-year deal worth about $825,000 annually. Now, he was courted and approached apparently by USC this offseason, which gave him, similar to we see with coaches, enough leverage to be able to come and do this. But now, Dad, as we have waded into this new world where we're not quite sure what every player makes in terms of NIL, and we've known coaching salaries for a long time, and every time a new job opens up, we see them balloon here. General manager is a position you used to not have in college football. And now we've had people in different roles operating in that capacity, using essentially this skill set to go out here and help teams manage their rosters. But in this day and age, having this guy have that exact title and get paid a salary that we now know, this feels like a huge watershed moment for the sport and how it's structured going forward. So how interested are you in this idea that college sports are now almost officially entitled, becoming more like their NFL counterpart?
Oh, it was a matter of time. I'm sure with the added responsibilities when NIL and the portal, especially the portal, because now you're recruiting outside of the normal high school senior recruiting and junior recruiting, you're recruiting players from other teams. I think what was happening early on as everybody was trying to figure it out was just people that were already in place were given added responsibilities, of like a GM or like a player personnel person while everybody was feeling this out. But now I think to where it's gotten and to where now it's a little more defined of the periods of where you can transfer and the portal and everything, that you have to have specific people for those jobs, be it a GM, be it a player personnel, and having like NFL type names or pro sport type names put to them, because that's where we are. There's no sense in trying to talk around it anymore. You need these extra people, not just somebody who was just given more responsibility and put more on their plate. You now are going, okay, this needs a role all its own, be it a GM, be it a player personnel. And you have to start putting these people in place, because you can't, as a head coach who has his finger in every part of the pie, I mean, there's just too much information and you have to delegate it, and now delegate it with specific positions.
And this specific position, I say re-sign. Courtney Morgan had been with Kalen DeBoer at Washington for the prior 2 seasons, helped build that roster into a team that fit in the national championship last year, and came over with DeBoer to Alabama this offseason. There are others in the industry already. Jake Trotter at ESPN reported that Texas Tech's GM James Blanchard had received a 2-year, $800,000 a year contract, or worth $800,000 in total. Courtney Morgan was making $500,000. So we know the exact way that this jumped going forward. And to your point, Dad, this is the interesting part, is college football coaches, you're right, have their hands in a lot. The head coach, and the reason we saw these salaries balloon so much, in part because Jimmy Sexton is great at his job, but the leverage he has is you had to do everything as the head coach. You had to be an ace recruiter. You had to be able to go in and put up that fence post around the area you wanted to recruit, in addition to all the X's and O's stuff, leading your team, getting these guys through class, everything that came with the job. And so you're being paid in totality for far more than your NFL counterparts that are just there to coach ball. And so I think that element of this has become fascinating in the way that has evolved there. The way the segment has evolved, we are now going to welcome in Christian Gonzalez. Again, Patriots star cornerback, kind enough to join us here on GoJo and Golic. Christian, good morning, man. How you doing? Oh, I don't think Christian can hear. Christian, you got us at this? Oh. All right, I don't think we can hear Christian right now. We're going to work on that just a moment here. Some technical difficulties as we're getting this thing going here, Dad. But again, I mean, excited to talk to Christian for a lot of reasons here. One, as I mentioned off the top of the show, I picked him to win Rookie of the Year last year on defense, and he was on that track. As I say, it wasn't his fault.
He was.
All right, Christian, I think we got him here now. Christian, you hear us?
Yeah, I'm good.
Awesome, man. Good morning. How you doing?
I'm good. How are y'all?
Good.
Doing well, man. We appreciate your time here. We know you got a lot going on in camp, and let's start there. How has camp gone for you? We mentioned your rookie season ended earlier than you wanted because of the shoulder injury, so how have you felt going now into year 2?
I felt good. I felt excited, really, is the main word I've just been describing, just to be able to go out there and play football again. It's sucks when it's taken away from you, but, you know, there was a reason behind it, but I'm glad to be able to be back out and just having fun playing ball.
How has the transition been from a Bill Belichick-led team to a younger, former Belichick player in Gerard Mayo?
Yeah, I mean, there's differences for sure. You know, they're two different people, but, you know, you're still keeping the main thing, just always focusing on getting better each day, coming in and, you know, just going to work and you know, enjoying the process of being here.
And keeping the main thing. How difficult has that been recently? Matthew Judon, a guy that was an important part of your defense the last couple of years, had a very public standoff with the organization. He's now in Atlanta. How difficult was it to try and keep the main thing during that?
I mean, it's you know, there's bumps in the road, but once you're solely focused on, like I said, keeping the main thing is, you know, the other things kind of they weed themselves out, to, if you can say that. But I mean, still just focused on who's on the team and who we're with right now.
As you transition at some point to a rookie quarterback in Drake May, being the third pick, it's just a matter of time. Do you feel that will put more pressure on the defense to perform to help out a young quarterback?
I mean, I wouldn't say pressure, but, you know, we as a defense, we like to have the game on our back. We like to, you know, go out there and set the tone, and that's kind of our identity, is we want to, you know, be thrown out there with challenges and things like that. So not to too much pressure.
Well, certainly part of your identity is also a family man. I saw the cool story before this season. You were actually able to buy your family a house. We talk about a lot of NFL players, and you get that contract, your first purchase. People talk about some of the fun things or the gaudy things. Why was this so important to you?
Yeah, that was just my biggest thing. Was my biggest goal in life to be able to make it to the NFL and, you know, buy my parents a house that they deserve, just because they did so much for me and my whole family. And raising, there's 4 of us now. There was 3 of us before my little sister. But, you know, especially my dad, being from Colombia and leaving everything he knew at 18 years old to come to America to chase his dream. And, you know, for him to be successful and raise such a successful family, I felt like it was finally my time to be able to pay him back. So it was a real surreal and fun moment.
No, it's incredible. I know it's a life-changing move in a lot of ways, getting to the NFL, but being able to give back and pay it forward like that is the stuff that we always love to see. So congratulations to you and your family all for making it to this level and making it to this point where you get the opportunity to chase your dream because of the work that your father and your family put in for that. Christian, we're up against the clock, man. I wish we could keep you for longer here, but we appreciate your time so much. Thank you and best of luck this season, man. We're excited to watch you play ball again.
Yeah, appreciate y'all having me.
Thanks,
definitely.
Man.
Christian Gonzalez, again, part of a Patriots defense, Dad, that we all expect to be the absolute standard and one of the best in the league.
Yeah, certainly will. And they're going to have to make up for the offensive woes this team is going to encounter this year. But the defensive side of the ball is usually very, very stout.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Coming up next, we're going to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third, and a reminder that the players can boo back. One man's quest to silence the boo birds himself. Next on GoJo and Golic. All right, y'all, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick ones send you into the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern when you can. And if you have to miss us, live on the DraftKings Network, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, Xumo Player, DraftKingsNetwork.com. Make sure you catch us and our great guests. Thanks to Christian Gonzalez, Patriots second-year cornerback, for joining us ahead of their upcoming season. You can catch that wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done. Guys, nostalgia is a hell of a drug, but Taco Bell nostalgia, it's one of the sweetest drugs mankind has ever known. And apparently, Taco Bell is dipping into that a little bit right now. They're launching a nostalgic menu with items dating back to the 1960s, including the tostada from the 1960s, the 1970s green burrito, and the 1980s Mexi Melt. So, Dad, in a world where we've seen plenty of Taco Bell menu items go by the wayside, it's nice to see them going back to some of the classics.
Yeah, it definitely is. And obviously, there'll be something for everybody here. I personally would not be into the tostada and the green burrito. I don't like refried beans. So I don't.
Oh,
I'm
really?
not a big fan of those. Yeah, I'm not. So I would pass on those, and I'd start in the 80s and go to the Meximelt with the pico de gallo, 3-cheese blend with mozzarella, cheddar, Monterey Jack with beef in a tortilla. That's where I would start. I would go 80s, 90s. And 2000s with the caramel apple empanada. But yeah, I'm not a refried bean guy.
There are few things on earth I mess with as much as I mess with beans. Like pretty much beans of all variety I rock with. Jesse, I don't know about what you're making a very interesting face. Are you pro bean? Are you anti bean? Because I couldn't love beans more. The refried variety of beans is just taking one of my favorite things and doing one of my favorite things with it, so it works for everybody. But what say you?
No, I love refried beans. I'm a big bean fan too. I was shocked, not very demure of you, Senior, to not like refried beans. Kind of brat.
Yeah, I was.
Here we go.
I was a little bit surprised. Dad has a much more like subdued palate. Like my dad doesn't like green things on his plate. He's not going to try like a bunch of like exotic or different foods. He's really a straight down the middle kind of guy. But I figured refried beans would kind of stick to that because again, it takes a food that could in theory be perceived as healthy and says, no, we're going to zhuzh this up a little bit and make it really taste good.
Yeah. Now I'll go with the beef gordita supreme. Flatbread filled with beef, sour cream, lettuce, 3-cheese blend, top of tomatoes. I like that. Again, no refried beans.
And you know what they didn't tell you guys about these, that's from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, et cetera, is that these foods were actually made then too. Because of all the chemicals, they can survive that many years. So you're actually getting something from the 60s.
Stop it. That is not very demure of you,
try and turn me
Jesse.
Against... Hey, you don't get to comment. You've never even been to Taco Bell. You've not walked a mile in our shoes. You've not stared down a fourth meal, mildly buzzed, mildly putting it lightly, in the back of a taxi in college, looking longingly at that beautiful purple glow as it begins to heal you before the pain even sets in.
No.
That's someone who's been there for me in my darkest hours and my brightest days of joy. Taco Bell is an angel sent from above.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like a cozy pillow.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it is. That honestly, that Taco Bell quesadilla, you can say what you want about any of the chemicals. That thing is one of the most unique tastes. It's kind of like McDonald's, the individual burgers at McDonald's. I understand it's probably only a burger in theory, but man, it tastes unique enough and wonderful enough to where I go back to the well anytime I'm in in the certain terminal in the Dallas airport. And upon these rocks, I will build my church. Jesse, why don't we get to that? This is something I had not seen or considered before. We've seen fans boo players. We've seen players get into it with fans. We have rarely seen players turn into fans later in the same competition they lost in and decide to boo the same players.
Yeah, so we had something crazy going on in Santo Domingo at a Challengers match. So Australian tennis player, who's apparently, I Googled him, he's kind of like the bad boy of Australian tennis. Bernard Tomic was kicked out of the final match of this event because he was booing and heckling the guy who beat him in the quarterfinals. So he loses to this guy. This guy continues continues to go on and play, and it's Andres Andrade, the guy who's playing. He goes to the event, is moving around the stands, wearing sunglasses, wearing a hat, heckling and booing the guy who beat him to the point where he's removed from the event. The crowd's cheering, get him out of here. I can't quite fathom this level of petty, but Bernard, our boy, is out here doing it.
This is not demure by any stretch of the imagination for Tomic. And as you said, he was walking around. He was trying to put himself in the closest position to Andrade to boo him and heckle him. Again, he lost to him in the quarters. This was the final, of which Andrade did lose 6-4, 6-4. But Andrade actually asked the ump to remove Tomic out of the court because he kept following him around. I mean, you want to talk about low class. Oh, my God.
I mean, it must have gone really weird with Zendaya before this because I thought it was just supposed to be challenger events were about overt sexual innuendo, not booing relentlessly your opponent. So this is a very different version and ending of the movie that I saw that was very good. But, Dad, this has big Dennis Schroeder energy where you go out and you're on the losing end and you just don't like the way it went, and so you decide to make your presence felt.
Man, and it turns out all the fans were cheering Andrade when he asked the ump to have Tomic removed. And you could see in the one video the official discussing with Andrade about leaving, Andrade trying to make his case. But the fans actually cheered when he left because he was such a pain in the ass. I mean, that had to be so uncomfortable, not sitting in one spot booing, but following him around so he was at the closest point where he could legally be at to harass the tennis player is beyond.
It's down bad in a way that I have really rarely seen for a professional athlete. Again, we've seen plenty of guys take shots online. We've heard them take shots in the media. There's part of me that appreciates the deeply personal nature of saying, no, I'm not going to have those layers of protection. I'm going to be right up in your grill. Now, it is drawing attention to yourself in a negative light. If you're going to draw attention to yourself, draw it, but in a positive way here. And he did not understand that assignment. Wild behavior on the tennis circuit there. Challenger, great movie. Jesse, let's finish off with the third. The Colorado School of Mines, which if you're a home field apparel fan, you're already very familiar with. They put out their preseason football headshots, and these young men understood the assignment.
I mean, can we just take a look at them right now? These are, I can't believe that they're real, but yeah, here are the headshots. Just get a good look at a couple of these. Which one of these is your favorite, GoJo? Because there's so many to choose from here. We have some missing eyebrows. We have different colored eyebrows and mustaches, and all around a little bit of something for everybody here. There was another one where a guy had his hair tied over his lip. So a lot of options to choose from. What's your favorite?
Yeah, this is somewhat of an annual tradition for the Colorado School of Mines to come out with these incredibly unique headshots. Deb, what I appreciate, and I feel like you would appreciate, is a lot of these guys went for the touch of gray. Now, we saw one of the players basically had half his facial hair and hair on his head all done up gray and the other half normal colored there. There's a lot of people going into the bottle for what you already have on your face, that touch of gray. This has got to be a nice badge of honor for you.
This is phenomenal. It's usually the reverse. People start to gray and they color their hair and darken and say, I don't want to age, where, man, give me the Moses look. I want to eventually have white hair and a white beard, carry a staff and part the Red Sea. That's how I want my hair to turn. So for these young players who don't have gray hair yet to act like they have some gray in their hair, I love it. I think it's a great tribute to the aged out there, of which I am included.
And we know on these rosters now, you've got COVID players, so you got like 7th-year seniors. Some of them could be old. I appreciated Jackson Sayers. He's the one that tied his hair on his head down into like a beard. Yeah. That was the only thing I had in my bag in college. I once did it was called a monkey tail, where you shave one side of your face and then you just go from this side to the other. You have the Fu Manchu go around here and then you cut it off at the top so it looks like a little monkey tail is curling around. I will find that picture if I can and post it online out of solidarity with the children who yearn for the mines here in Colorado. But if you yearn for this podcast, make sure you go and download, subscribe, rate, and review it. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.